agenda link on the screen as well as in the chat as we continue to add it in there. My name is Tim Leister. I am kind of the lead for our network group, and I'll introduce the team in just a minute here, but we would appreciate to kind of know where everybody is coming from this morning. So if you wouldn't mind in the chat, putting your name in there, your district or ELA, and maybe your LEA and your title as well. We kind of want to get a feel for who's with us today. So it's always great to see where so many of you are coming into today's meeting from to get a feel for who's going to be with us today. So please continue to add that in. Remember, this is our network. We want to kind of make this our own. We want to make connections with each other. So seeing who's with us each meeting always goes a long way in getting these connections across the state as we continue to build our network. So this is our great team who's leading this group. You can kind of see them on the Zoom by their backgrounds. They've all been part of kind of creating the agendas for today. You're going to talk with a lot of them in the different breakout rooms as we go through the meeting today. So they can be kind of your connections within our larger group too. So as you're having conversations today, please feel free to reach out to anybody on the team. We're always looking for feedback too as to how we can make these times together more beneficial to you. So always looking for those ideas from you as we go through our meeting. So we know that some of you are joining us for maybe the fourth or fifth time, and others of you are joining us for the first time. So we always like to review kind of our mission and vision for this network. This network meeting is part of a larger community of practice. But during our network meetings, this is really our time to reach a large group. We've tried to launch this statewide network for administrators, for teachers, for instructional coaches, for curriculum people to come together to have conversations around student-centered learning practices that are happening within their district, and to really find out what's happening and also ask questions of others as to how you can kind of work through some of the challenges that you're facing to move some of the progress forward in these different areas. We recognize that people are at all different points in this process. You might be here just to kind of learn a little bit more about what student-centered learning is. Others of you might be doing this work within your districts and starting to work forward in these areas. So we invite people throughout the state to join us in this endeavor. So please share that tiny URL too with your colleagues. This network is more than just the 4 network meetings that we have virtually each year. We post out newsletters, and you're going to find out today there's many events that are going to be happening around the state going forward where you can connect with others in your local area as well as the statewide area. So those visions for our network kind of go along, I hope, with the visions that we created. So if you were with us last meeting, one of the activities we did was kind of ask you 2 questions about our vision for education. And one of them was about students should be able to, and we asked you to kind of finish that sentence for us. So doing a little bit of an AI summary of all the different inputs that you gave us, really the popular responses were around agency and voice and ownership, as well as collaboration and self-assessment. And that certainly follows along with the goals that we have of the network. And learning should, the popular responses from all of you were about authentic, relevant, connected to the real world, with an emphasis still on student voice and choice, and also inclusion in their school. So it's great to see that so many of you who gave input on those, and you can see the link in today's agenda if you'd like to go back and look at what some others have put in there and would like to add to that, feel free to do that as well. So, knowing your inputs, I think we're all kind of on the same page as to where we're trying to move education around the state. And we're hoping, again, this time together can be a way to do that. So here's our agenda for today. We're using the PA Student-Centered Learning Blueprint as kind of our guide for these different meetings that we have, our in-person events. And we want to just make sure you understand what that is, because we know each of our meetings we've been sharing that with you. But again, if you're joining us for the first time, we want to make sure that you have an understanding of what that is and how it could be used. If you joined us at our last meeting, you will see that we had asked you to do a little bit of goal setting. So again, knowing that some of you are at this meeting for the first time, we'll review that process and give you an opportunity to do that. We're really excited for our guest presenter today. Deion Jordan from KnowledgeWorks is going to be sharing some of his expertise around the idea of teaching and learning, and that's going to be the component that we focus on today. So we'll have an opportunity to hear from Deion and then put you into some small breakout rooms to discuss some of the information that he shares with us. We'll also then revisit the components that you're focusing on. So as you set some goals for yourself, one of those 5 components might have been an area that you wanted to focus on, and you'll have an opportunity to join a breakout room to discuss that in a little bit more detail. And then we'll wrap up today sharing all the exciting events that are coming up around the state. We're building in-person events to go along with these virtual meetings. We have school site visits planned. So a lot is happening that we're really excited to share with you at the end of the meeting today. Okay, so again, just a reminder here as to how this blueprint can be a tool and a resource for you to use as you start to go through this work with the leadership teams within your district. This comprehensive blueprint can be found in our OER Commons. One of the things we did in past meetings too was to share how you could use this tool with your administrative teams as you start to do some planning. So if you go into OER Commons, you're going to find some great resources as to how you could break down this blueprint and use it within your administrative meetings, and it kind of gives you a guide as to how you could do that. So we welcome you to look through it. It's a very comprehensive document. There are 5 system components that are part of this: the administrative and leadership piece, learning models, curriculum design and development, teaching and learning, and community outreach. And again, we're trying to focus on some of these different components in each of our different meetings. So that's how we're developing this year, this year's meetings. Last year was a lot about districts and LEAs sharing their stories about how they're moving forward. But we want to use this year to kind of get into the different components of the blueprint and have you connect with others who are looking to grow in these different areas. So again, remembering that this is a very comprehensive document and you can never focus at any one time on all of these areas, but we're hoping that you have an area of focus that you want to talk to others about and can kind of move forward on. But we're going to, again, use these meetings as a time to focus in these different areas. So as a summary of what those components are, you can read them again in full in the blueprint, but you can also see here what these components are a part of. The administrative and leadership was the focus of our last meeting. We had Dr. Snell with us who shared a nice message about taking some risk and doing some things outside of your maybe comfort zone to push forward in different areas. So we have learning models, curriculum and design, and today's focus is going to be on that teaching and learning aspect. And then we also see community outreach on there as well. So each of our meetings will be kind of a speaker that will focus on these different areas, but all of our meetings will allow you to come back to the system component that you're focusing on and talk through with some members of our work group committee on how you can continue to grow and work through in some of those different areas. Okay, so I want to pause and give the opportunity, since Erin Cummings from Chester County IU led the activity last time about goal setting. I want to give her the opportunity for those of you who weren't part of the last meeting to kind of get a feel for what that was all about. So Erin, I'll pass it over to you.
Perfect. Can you pass screen sharing over to me as well?
Sure. So I'll stop sharing my screen.
Excellent. All right. Perfect. So I am going to be putting into the chat as well the SEL goal component worksheet, which you will see here on my screen. And what we were thinking is, there are 5 amazing components to student-centered learning. Unfortunately, we can't work on all of them at once. So we had our groups select just one of the components that they wanted to really concentrate on. And that's what you selected your breakout rooms on that we that we'll do later this afternoon, this morning as well. So our first page of this, we were having you identify who are your team members, who are the most important people that are impact players, including administrators, some teacher leaders, community members, people across your district that are really going to make an impact on your goal setting and working through this component. Additionally, we had you identify that system component and write a SMART goal. What is your goal for this? And the goal could have been something small or something big, just something that you're trying to work on towards perhaps administration and leadership, perhaps community outreach. We also realize that there's going to be challenges when it comes to working towards each of these. There's going to be some barriers that your district is facing. There's going to be things that just get in the way additionally. So we had you come up with some goals based off of this particular component you selected, and then take the goal back to your district and reflect. What can we do now? What can we start with? And maybe what you were able to start with was talking to other members of your district and identifying, hey, this is what we want to work on. In each of your documents, you did have a tab for November 19th, and it was filled out with some questions for you. And we wanted to kind of get a progress check. Since setting your goal, what progress have you made? And it's okay if that progress to you might seem small. Every little step helps in making these changes. We also are looking to know what evidence are you gathering, but also what barriers did you encounter? So I'd love to take just a few minutes now. If you have not created your goal or selected your component, I'd love for you to go through the blueprint. And I do have that linked up here. And look at these 5 components. Select one that you think, hey, we can work on this. We can really dive into the curriculum design and development. It's something we're already working on, and work on creating your goal. If you were here last time, what you're going to be working on quickly is just filling in, what were some challenges? What were the barriers that you faced? And how have you adjusted your approach, or how might you need to adjust your approach? So I'm going to give you a couple minutes just to work on your own on these documents, about 3 minutes. Okay. All right. So what I'm hoping is that you got a few things down, either challenges and barriers that you face, some adjustments you need to make, or maybe even starting just to select your goal and area and kind of identifying your team members. And you could take this into the breakout rooms that we're going to have later this morning, where we're really diving more into our SEL components. So I am going to pass this back over to Tim. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Erin, so much. And again, hopefully that's a living document that you can continue to work through together, either individually or with your teammates, however you'd like. So again, this morning, as I mentioned before, we focus on a different component at each of our meetings. So today is really looking at the teaching and learning components. So this kind of summarizes what we're talking about. So really it is that shift from the teacher-centered classroom to the more student-centered approaches. So we're really looking at how in this component we can explore problem solving through inquiry. We can meet the diverse needs of our learners and really engage and construct knowledge and understanding for each of our students individually. And as we build that constructive feedback to support student growth and making that more of an individual type of process that personalizes the instruction for our kids. So it's certainly not something that happens easily, and it's a process for many of our classroom educators to work through. But we're excited to focus on that, and I'm going to pass it over to Josh Ecker from Chester County IU to introduce today's guest speaker. So Josh?
Thank you, Tim, and good morning, everyone. I am very excited to introduce our speaker this morning. Deion Jordan is the Director of Teaching and Learning for KnowledgeWorks, a national organization committed to cultivating personalized, competency-based learning environments for students that really embody what we mean by student-centered learning. In Deion's work, he leads and supports regional, district, and statewide partnerships that support education systems in translating learner-centered visions into actionable strategies through design, implementation, and continuous improvement. And with that, I will turn it over to Deion.
Good morning. Morning, everyone. Yeah, I don't think I need to do an introduction because of that, Josh. I appreciate it. Thanks, Josh. And hello, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. I want to just kind of preface this by saying I'm at the airport. So if you can hear what's going on in the background, apologies in advance. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. So thanks, Josh. I won't reintroduce myself, Deion Jordan. I'm actually traveling to Pittsburgh right now, and I believe I saw Bobby Ann. And I see someone that I know. Bobby, there you are. Good to see you. We'll be joining a school tour tomorrow at Beaver Area School District and leading a workshop on our new innovation guide. But as Josh said, I work for KnowledgeWorks, where we support student-centered learning, personalized competency-based learning at a national level. And I'm on the schools team, and most of my work is around building capacity of educators, of leaders, of systems towards systemic transformation, towards personalized learning, personalized competency-based learning. And that looks like working with school districts or working with regions or working again with an actual full state out of the Department of Education, for instance. So what I'd like to spend some time talking through today, and as questions arise, please feel free to just come off mute and ask throughout. I'd like for this to be as engaging as possible. Is to have a conversation about the importance of educator competencies, particularly as we think about transformation, as we think about change. And even I was listening to a bit of what Aaron was sharing, when we think about the goals that we're setting and how do we put folks in a position to be able to see themselves in change. And so that's kind of a big part of what this will be. And if you've not had an opportunity to check out the Remake Learning educator competencies, educator competency progressions, I'll share those in the chat as well. And I'll give you an opportunity to kind of dig in and make sense of them individually. And then if we have time, collectively as a group. So what's the real importance of these? And I think for me particularly, like why am I a huge proponent of educator competencies? I think as I have conversations with systems and teachers, the instructional coaches, the district representatives, these questions are arising around we want to redesign, we want to re-engineer, we want to restructure our system, our teaching and learning practices, the learning experience, the culture. And oftentimes there is in fact a shared vision. What tends to be missing is everyone having the ability, and not just the educators, even the learners, of what it all means and what's my role in this. And so teachers often are asking, what does this mean for my practice? What do you actually want when you're asking me to shift teaching and learning towards student-centeredness, towards competency-based learning, towards project-based or place-based learning or inquiry-based? And what does that mean for me? I'll show this graphic. What does it mean for me in my current identity, my current self as an educator, and relation to this future being that you'd ideally like me to become? But I think more importantly, and what I love about these competencies is that there is this self-commitment, right? That I've committed to recognizing that there is perhaps a need to improve my practice so that learners have so that we can push learners to achieve the outcomes that they desire, and be ready for what's next and to be who they are. And coaches often are asking, how do they support the change? And more importantly, how do they actually serve as that role model, as that mentor in a non-evaluative way, right? Like our goal here is growth. It's deliberate development. And then where that then lands is at the point of the leader, right? How are leaders thinking about change? How are leaders thinking about scaling it so that it's not isolated to an individual classroom or an individual hallway, but that the actual shifts that we're asking, of our system to make, that increases learner voice or learner voice, agentic experiences and engagement, community-oriented projects, right? How do we actually begin to codify that? And for me, when I really think about this from a leadership perspective, schools are learning institutions by default. And I was reading this article from the Harvard Business Review actually about Building 21, which is a school in Philadelphia. And Building 21, when they opened in 2014, set out their two leaders, actually were getting their leadership doctorate at Harvard Graduate School of Education, and kind of gravitated toward this principle called DDO, deliberately developmental organizations. That, and the goal of the fundamental principle of that is that there are two things happening in an organization: what we're practicing, what we're doing, and then on the other side of that is what we're learning, how we're growing. And deliberately developmental organizations really are do exactly that. They set up deliberate structures and deliberately engineer how we think about capacity for development, how we think about time, how we think about relationships, how we think about growth, to ensure that everyone is continuing to grow and that it's not isolated. And that's extremely important for education change and for change in general. And so the reason then that these competencies become paramount is because of this point called the neutral zone. And so this is Bridges' transitional model. When we talk about change, folks are like, "Oh, this is great. Yeah, I'm all with you, right? I want I want more voice in my classroom. I want more choice, to give learners more choice. Perhaps maybe it's through a learning pathway. Perhaps it's through a project-based experience or an inquiry-based experience. But how do I get from A to C?" And a lot of folks sit in B because they are unable to fully recognize what we're asking them. And to Aaron's point, what the long-term goal is and how my individual contributions connect to this long-term shared vision that we all have to shift our system. And so the educator competencies fill that neutral zone. They sit at that neutral zone to put in perspective for educators that path forward across a developmental progression. And so when we really think about that and we think about transformative change, those competencies allow for the educator to really understand not just the role that they're in, but the role that they're going, but what the role and responsibilities will be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 years from now. But also, more importantly, that we're assessing our progress, that we're capturing quick wins, right? That's vital. And that we're setting meaningful goals, right? And we're setting those SMART goals, and that those SMART goals are aligned not just with the shared vision and the strategic priorities of my school district or my individual school, but they're aligned to how I see my own growth, how my instructional coach sees my growth, or my instructional leader sees my growth. And then this final level, this advancing and sustainability level, allows for the educator to leave the classroom and to really think about, how are you sharing, right, this generative element? How are you sharing what you've mastered around equitable learning supports or empowering learners with others in your professional learning communities, in the hallways, as a teacher mentor, as a teacher leader? And so it's this coalescence of self, of system, of shared vision that manifest in the individual through a recognition of the importance of educator competencies to kind of be the guide for that change. And so when we think about the progressions, and now we're going to get to an example of the framework. When we structured these, the ultimate goal of them were to really, again, show what at that primary level for us is a commitment to the shift. And ultimately that's that growth mindset, right? We want folks to say, hey, I'm committed to this, and I want to go through this level of change in development and growth in my practice. And I also need a map, right? That North Star to kind of get there. So, excuse me, that compass to get there. And so the competencies don't just, again, sit in the classroom or on a shelf, but that they also find themselves in a personal reflection, in collaborative reflection, and professional learning communities around collaboration. When we're thinking about assessment, how we're assessing equitably, that these competencies are showing up, that the instructors or coaches are using them, and my favorite is in a non-evaluative way. Right? My goal is not, I gotcha. That's never it. It's growth for the sake of growth, because we understand the importance of continuous learning and the impacts that it has on our learners when we're at the forefront of our practice. But also putting our leaders in a position to think about decisions that they can make around how they're structuring professional learning in their schools, how they're aligning professional learning and professional development to their strategic priorities, to their school-based priorities, to their community priorities. And more importantly, I think this final part that I love is coherence. How are we creating coherence? And we want to put everyone on the same pathway. And the competencies have entry points. Some folks might show up at a level 2, some folks might show up at a level 3, and some folks are at a level 1, and that's okay, right? And in some instances, it's the pendulum swing. We're kind of going back and forth between 2 and 3, right? Because we want to ensure that we're able to fully master what it is that's being asked of us, so that we can advance our system. And so you kind of heard me talk about these 4 levels. That level 1 is a commitment, right? We're committing to the change. I'm committing to growth and development. And now I'm going to go and begin to implement X, right? I'm experimenting with co-design tasks. Perhaps I'm going to take a teacher-centered or teacher-driven approach going forward, where I'm designing the task. Then we kind of grow, where I'm then creating standard operating procedures, where I'm able to pull in learners to co-design those tasks. And then ultimately, when you build that agency, where learners are able to design those tasks. And then we get to a place of sustainability, right? This is a self-sustaining system. Within when I say system in this context, I'm talking about that micro level system as the classroom, right? I'm seeing sustainability because my learners are in a classroom where we have a station rotations and in-class flip. I don't really have to do anything, right? I'm sitting over here and I'm working with my learners in this corner, with these learners in this corner, and everyone else is able to agentically go through a learning experience. And so that's kind of that arc. And then finally, look, this works. I've reflected on it. I've looked at the barriers. I've looked at perhaps I've collected some student feedback. They said, hey, I dislike this part of what you're asking of us, but we like this. And I'm modifying it, that continuous improvement, right? That's in the classroom, that's at the individual practitioner level. And then I say, look, I think that when I'm thinking about co-designing learning experiences, I've kind of mastered that. And I have impact and outcome data to show. Now I want to advance that. So now I'm thinking and working with my colleagues and my leaders, say, how do we begin to systematize this? Can we try this across this particular grade level or this particular discipline? And then ultimately, this works for our system. And the feedback says it works. How do we begin to codify? How do we make it a reality for what we do every single day? And so here's an example. It's not the example. Here's the context for how we frame each of the six competencies. And so again, it starts at that committing to the shift. And a lot of the language that you see is that the educator is recognizing, right, the need. And then they're shifting toward a particular practice into planning for learning and application. Now we're beginning to, I recognize learner agency. And now I want to kind of define that for myself and start to build a system to begin to practice that in my classroom. Perhaps I'm receiving some coaching supports on this. And I'm working with my coach to develop out a plan for implementation and evaluation or analysis of what it is I'm doing for myself, from the coach, from the learners, to a place of mastery, So we've now co-designed that culture, that system within the classroom. And we're starting to see the fruits of the labor in real time. And let's say we get to a certain point where we've mastered it. Now we want to put you again in a position where you're being generative, where you're able to again say, hey, look, I've tried this thing and it works. Can you give it a try? Can we do it together? I love co-teaching. I began my second year of teaching as a co-teacher. It's nothing like trying things out as two instead of one. So here's an example of relevant learning experiences, and you can kind of read what the competency says at the top. I'm not going to read it, but again, it starts at that commitment level, where educators commit to centering learning around cultural knowledge, prior learning experience. Right, we want to always activate prior learning experience, and always want to be asset based, right? Because every one of us shows up with something, right? You don't just kind of. At some point, I suppose we exist tabula rasa, but as we kind of go through life, whether it's formal learning or informal learning, whether it's at home or in the classroom or at the park, we're learning things and we're showing up with things, and all of those things really impact our frame of reference, our frame of mind, our situatedness, and how we learn, how we think about learning, and our interest. And we really want to put educators in a position to really commit to that, to being asset based. And continue to activate that priority. And then we're shifting into this planning phase, right? We want to start to plan and execute. And so the educator then is beginning to engage in cycles of learning focused on designing culture responsive learning. So now we're starting to utilize culture responsive practices, right? Perhaps we're in an informal circle. Perhaps it is advisory. I love advisory programs. Particularly facing history ourselves, because it puts us in a position to really think about who are we, how do we show up, and how does that impact how we learn, and what we're interested in. And then we want to begin to apply those instructional techniques, right, in real time to co-designing. And so then the educator begins to assist learners in developing positive cultural identities and providing opportunities for students to develop cross-cultural relationships in the classroom, out of the classroom. And then finally, we get to that advancing level, where educators promote asset-based practices and ensure learners see themselves and their communities reflected not just in the learning experience of my classroom, but in all of their learning experiences. And perhaps there's a grade level project that is place-based. And in that, right, there are cultural contexts and cultural conditions and elements that are in there. And we see the efficacy of it, right? And then at this point, we say, hey, it works. And maybe we want to have, this is our ninth grade first year project will be on, a culturally responsive place-based project. And that's what we're going to use every single year, because we know it works. And that's a great entry point for learners to begin thinking about not just the disciplines, but more importantly, interdisciplinarity and transdisciplinarity, right? We want learners to be able to utilize their skills across the courses that they're taking. Because I don't think, I'm always using, I think, 2 or 3 skills at once, right? And so we really want to put our learners in the same position to do exactly that. All right, so that was a lot that I've said. I'm going to stop sharing and just a quick pause, take some questions, some comments. What's coming up for you? I'm going to stop sharing because I can't see anyone and I like to see folks.
All right. So I think what we'll do now is give you an opportunity to maybe consider some of the things that Deion shared with us this morning. So here's what we're going to do. And you can see the link that is on our agenda today for a little collective reflection. And we'd really like for you to kind of think through some of the things that you just heard about. So again, I'll share my screen here with you again today. And we're going to put you in some breakout rooms so you can just have a conversation. Because in a large group like this, sometimes people don't necessarily want to come out and ask these questions. But when you get into your small breakout room, just consider, what did you learn? What are you still curious about, and what challenged your thinking? And if you can add those things to that collective Google document in the appropriate column, if Deion's able to stay with us for a little while, maybe we could look at that document, and maybe he's able to kind of find some themes in there of some things that he could share a little bit more about. So we're going to put you in those breakout rooms for about 5 minutes. And Deion, if you're able to stay with us and your flight isn't coming just now, when they get back from the group, maybe there'll be some questions that you can address when they get back here, if that sounds good.
That sounds great.
Okay.
I have a few questions, if you don't
Okay.
mind, about there in breakout rooms. There was a second portion for that, but if folks also wanted to reflect on these questions here, if you have time to kind of look through that competency framework, here are some questions for you to reflect on as well.
That's great. That's great. Okay, Aaron, are our breakout rooms ready to go?
Breakout rooms are open.
Okay, we'll put you in there just for about 5 minutes or so, and then we'll bring you back together as a whole group. So if you can go ahead and join that breakout room, we'll see you back here in about 5 minutes. Pause the recording.
Oops, they're returning us.
All right, so as we're returning, I think we're all back from our breakout rooms. So as you've been having some discussions and talking, you've been adding some ideas to that collective document. Deion's been looking at that, and wanted to give him an opportunity to follow up on either some of the things that you learned or were curious about, or even some of the questions that he posed to you as well. So go ahead, Deion.
Yep. So there are a lot of really great thoughts and questions in this document. One person asked, how do we break it down for teachers who may be overwhelmed or new to teaching? We want them to be successful and feel confident. I really love that question. I think starting with a first year teacher, I think in some instances, day one's always going to be overwhelming, but you don't know what you don't know. And if you enter in a system that has particular values and beliefs, a particular way of doing teaching and learning, of designing learning experiences, right? We develop those educators, right? We serve as their mentors, as their formal and informal coaches. And actually, I think something like a competency framework can actually create ease, particularly if we are intentional with working with new teachers and teachers that feel overwhelmed, and asking the right questions, providing timely, authentic, meaningful feedback that is instructive, and that also, again, continues to celebrate the things that we are doing well. And something I want to emphasize is, in using a framework like this, it's not about, hey, you're doing this wrong, right? You should be doing it this way. are are perhaps our gaps, our inadequacies, our growth areas or opportunities um, are exactly that. They're growth opportunities and they're growth areas. And I think refining and restructuring it that way is also important, right? Because all of us are continuing to learn. And so how are we framing conversations? How are we framing the rollout of a particular program, professional development program, particular policy, a particular experience, to ensure that folks again are able to see themselves in it, to make sense of it. And I think sometimes we're often doing change to others instead of doing change together. So again, we want to be sure that everyone's on the same boat, going to the same place, that everyone in essence has a compass in their hand, all pointing to the same North Star, right? And then we're moving in that way. So there are a lot of other thoughts here. Again, I'd love to open it. I don't know if folks want to come off mute and ask a question or share a comment.
Yeah, we would love for you if you have a specific question, if you want to come off mute and ask, or if you can put it in the chat. We'd really appreciate while Deion's with us if you have any questions for him.
I'm going to come off mute for just a second. It's more of an affirmation than a question. One of the things that I have some curiosities about is like when you're thinking about a place to start. I run a leadership program that's founded on design thinking. And one of the things that I hear throughout KnowledgeWorks content is this idea of starting with empathy and understanding others, including teachers who are overwhelmed, including, people who have anxieties in spaces. And by starting with empathy, I think that can get to a really clear North Star vision that isn't something you have to not done to you, but with you, right? Where you can get agreement and consensus in a collective action way. That is always a better way to get people on board because they're motivated for themselves to do that.
Yes. I couldn't agree more with that. Empathy, creating entry points, having tough conversations and just conversations in general. I love a root cause analysis. I don't think it fully fits here, but ultimately what I want to get at is the why, right? Like, we want to have conversations with people to get to a place where they go, oh, okay, like perhaps I see the roadblock, like I understand it. I'm committed to, and I love this one. I'm committed to what's next. Look, I think for me as an educator, I'm always the intrinsic motivation, right, is there because I believe in the power of young people. I believe in the power of education to really, to truly allow for people to do what it is they want to do in the world, to prepare them for what's next. And I think about myself and my own story I grew up in West Philadelphia. And what took me from there to here is education. And more importantly, because other people, right, believed in me. And that created the extrinsic motivation. And now you got intrinsic and extrinsic coming together, right, to be the driving force for me. And so we really want to put people, to your point, in a position where they feel motivated, where they feel confident, right, in doing what it is they want to do so that they are ultimately successful, not only as professionals, but again, when we link that back to the intrinsic, that's because they want their students to be successful. So when I feel successful, and I can see the impact of what I'm doing, that's because I can see the impact on my learning. So I really appreciate that point, starting with absolutely.
All right, thank you for that. Anyone else with a question or even an affirmation or comment or maybe a connection within your own district or situation that you're seeing this progress.
Hi, good morning. I'm Lynn from Salisbury Township in Carbon High Intermediate Unit 21. I think what I found interesting in talking to our group is, we're all at different points, but sharing this framework allows everybody to find their entry point, and also the opportunity to celebrate the successes that maybe you're already seeing. And I'm looking forward to, I've seen these resources before, but I'm looking forward to kind of looking at them curated together in the way that you've done, to be able to, and I want to use the word assess, but make observations about where we are and where we want to go. So appreciate the conversation and bringing multiple resources together in that way.
Of course, thanks, Lynn. And again, that entry point is important. And I spent vast majority of my time when I was working in an actual school, as a director of competency-based learning. And so the reason we wanted the competencies is that exact reason, right? We know that learners are in different places, and we want to be able to pinpoint with some level of objective accuracy, objective loosely, as possible, right? So that we can better support them. And I always got to bring in Vygotsky's zone of proximal development, right? We take the data that we have about the learner, and we're able to say, hey, you don't need me, right? You can do this on your own, or you need a little support, right? As it pertains to increasing rigor within a particular learning experience. And Danny has a point in here that I love, this point around compliance over engagement. Yeah, we got to shift the culture, right? And get out of a culture of compliance, comply, to a culture that is empathetic, that is, again, in my opinion, deliberately developmental, and deliberately engaging, right? We want to continue to motivate the educator to feel, to recognize the power of continuous learning, and the impact that learning can have on the experience, and thus ultimately on the outcomes for the learner. So I really appreciate that point, and that's kind of the big part of that this idea of systems transformation, is that point that you make, Danny. So I appreciate it.
Virginia, you had a question? I see your hand raised.
Yeah, sort of a reflection. How's that? So I've been doing this a long time, and some of you were with me 20 years ago when we did this in Classrooms for the Future. We talked about student-centered learning and personalized learning. And one of my dear colleagues said to me, Virginia, I've been doing this for 30 years and nothing has changed. And here I am 20 years later. I've been doing this for 20 years. Nothing has changed. And here we are in this environment with AI. And if nothing changes now, there you go.
Yeah. I think AI has the capacity to, obviously, to create efficiencies, as we think about change. I think as a lifelong learner, for me, it's always, you got to learn before you use it, right? So we can be in that evaluation phase. But change takes time. When we think about change management, does that mean it needs to take 50 years or 100 years? I think we got to think about the system, right? Are we talking about the overarching system of public education? Are we talking about the system at the federal level? We're talking about it at the state level. And so really thinking about the macro, the meso, and the micro levels of system change. And a part of our strategy, I co-lead Remake Learning's personalized learning working group. And a part of our strategy this year is kind of regional coherence, because we've all been engaged in this change work. And what we realized is, we need data to kind of to show for it, right? And from a statistical analysis standpoint, what it really is it's about the story we're telling. Obviously, it's about the data we're collecting, but I think we're always collecting data, formally, informally, qualitative, quantitative, categorical, primary and secondary forms of data. And so, we want to put folks in a position in the Southwest PA region to think about, what data do you have, over the past 5 years that speaks to shifts toward learner-centeredness, that speaks to shifts towards personalized learning. What's working, what's not working? We're thinking also about, what are the conditions for change, right? Sometimes I think we also talk about change, but we've not established the conditions for the change that is we seek, right? And so we really want to ensure that we are being very intentional at the outset to create the systems and the structures and the processes that are going to guide us 5, 10, 15 years through our strategic planning processes, through our standing up of a guiding coalition. And then we want to ensure that there's coherence around it, and that folks have, again, the necessary tools to really see themselves in it and to evaluate it. And I think that's really the most important part. How are we, are we in the same place we were year 5 in comparison to year 1? And if so, why is that, right? And so what's the SWOT analysis? We really also want to put people in a position to be able to evaluate that so that they can actually say, hey, we are moving toward our change goal, or we're not. And then we really need to think about, well, why is it that we're not doing that thing? And so I think in some instances, there's been, from my perspective, there's been a lot of talk about change. And actually, from an organizational behavior standpoint, beyond just most organizations fail at this thing called change for the exact reasons that I think you've alluded to. And a big part of that, again, is that the system is not there, and the time piece is really a barrier, right? It takes time, and so we really got to think about change across space and time. We're going to do this in 3 years. We're going to do this in 5 years. Do this in 10 years, and that's going to get us to where we need to be. Hopefully, that's a step in the right direction. But that's how we do system change and capacity building in KnowledgeWorks. Okay, any final thoughts or questions?
Tim, Pam Moran here. Am I unmuted? I think I am now.
Yeah, we
you're
can hear you.
All right. I'd like to offer the counterpoint to that pessimistic worldview that feels like the idea that, as Virginia said, that we live in this pendulum swinging world in education where we try something, we get it off the ground, it fails, we then go back to where we were, and then we keep moving. I actually think that there are more examples, and I have to say it's because of the connectivity that exists today that did not even exist 10 years ago, that there are more examples of connected shifts, transformative change, reimagined learning, remade learning going on all over the country, state by state, than I've ever seen in my, as I describe it, my white-haired long career. That I think that we have reason to be optimistic. And I have to say that I think PASCL is a concrete example of it, that what you're doing today probably would not have happened prior to the pandemic. But right now, we see states networking similarly to what you're doing, bringing together people, creating that coalition of the people who are willing to take some risk and move that work forward. And I think that the kind of work that Deion is laying out today and that you're doing and that you're embracing is going to change Pennsylvania in ways that Pennsylvania has never changed. And it is more likely to be sustainable now than it ever has been in the history of probably Pennsylvania education. So I'm going to be optimistic, and thank you for the work that you're all doing.
I appreciate that. I'm putting in the chat Lippitt and Oster's model for managing complex change, right? And I think, again, when we think about that, right, what are all the elements we need? And this is just one model. What are all the things we need? And when something's missing, like vision, right, well, that creates confusion. If we're missing an action plan, right, we're talking about change, we have a strategic plan that points to where we want to be in 2030, but there's not a strategic implementation plan. There's not a plan to get us, again, to get us from A to B to C to D and so forth and so on. Well, if we don't have that, then we have false starts. We don't know where to start. And what I love, again, about these competency progressions is there are no false starts, right? Because we know where we are and where we're going. I can see the future. So there's a bit of foresight into it. We want to continue building those, not just the skill of foresight in individuals, but the skill of foresight in the system. Because we are systems manifesting, right? We are the embodiment of our institutions. And so our behaviors are what actually create the change. And then again, that generative part of that is, well, how am I sharing, right? I might have changed the system. I changed, the system hasn't. Well, that's good. That's a positive. That's a win. How am I then creating those generative moments to continue to advance and pull people along with me? And so to Pam's point, that guiding coalition, the coalition of the willing. And so I think, my final point, because I have to run, I think about is Roger's adoption curve. And Roger's adoption curve is for technological adoption. I won't get into the AI bit. But on the ends of the bell curve, can't draw here, the bell curve, right? You have your laggards on the end, and then you have the folks that are like, I'm all on board. I'm ready. I'm day one. I'm committed. And we want to then find these two groups coalescing at the middle, right? And so who's that guiding force that's going to say, look, we're committed to this. We're unwavering, right? Change takes discipline. That's hard, right? And so the system needs to be disciplined. We need to be disciplined. The learners need to be disciplined, so that we can get to the place where it is we actually all want to be, and to accomplish that vision. So I appreciate you all allowing me to be here. I truly do. This is great. And you all have really great thoughts. I'll leave my email in the chat if anyone wants to follow up. But thank you, Josh. Thank you, Aaron. Thanks, Tim. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Deion. We appreciate your knowledge and your sharing with us. Loved all the ideas that you shared with us, and especially what resonated with me was that idea of everyone seeing themselves as a part of that change and having the ability to be a part of that. And that's so difficult as transition happens within our districts and our organizations, to be able to make sure that's ongoing so everybody sees themselves as a part of that. So thank you for your message today. We really appreciate that. And again, hope we connect with Deion at some point down the road.
Likewise. Bye, y'all.
Bye. So I'm sure Deion gave you a lot of different points to think about. And as we transition into the next part of our agenda today, we have these different areas of focus. And, the teaching and learning is just one aspect of this, but there are many different aspects of kind of making these systemic changes. So again, using the Pennsylvania Student-Centered Learning Blueprint as our model, we're going to give you some time to go into some breakout rooms based upon your choice. So we have some different members of our group that are leading these different areas. So together with Holly will be Josh today in the administration and leadership group. And then you can see the other kind of breakout room leads that are going to be in there. So we're going to give you an opportunity to go into those groups for about 10 minutes or so and have some conversations specifically about those different components. And then we'll bring you back to the larger group to wrap up our meeting and again, share some things that are happening around the state moving forward. So Aaron, do you have those breakout rooms ready to go?
Rooms are open and you are able to self-select.
So please select one of those rooms. And again, we'll bring you back here in about 10 minutes or so to kind of wrap up today's meeting. Okay, as we welcome you back to the main room, we just want to do a quick time for each of the breakout room leads to share a little bit about the conversation and maybe some of the ideas that were discussed. So we'll just go in my order here. So we'll start with the administration and leadership group. Yeah. Anything there, Holly and Jeff? Josh?
So we talked about where we're at on the spectrum, and a large, many of the people in the group are, at the beginning, the not yet phase, working on it. We talked about how having a whole district always getting to the point of the top of the spectrum was challenging because of staff turnover, administration turnover. You'll always be maybe fluctuating through those stages. And then Nicole Dice from Turkey Foot Valley School District was telling us about how they're using badging and that they eliminated grade levels for reading and math at the elementary area. And then, of course, we had a million questions for her after that. That's all she had to say. And we talked about how she brought the community on board, and we ran out of time.
All right. Thank you, Holly. How about learning models from Aaron and Kendi?
I can speak to that. So I had the pleasure of getting to chat with Misty from Warren County School District, who has an upcoming site visit, by the way. So you should definitely check that out. And we talked a lot about their virtual academy and how they are trying to start integrating wellness checks for their students. And they're looking at some different ways to build that into their schedule during the day. So we, discussed some of the ideas that they kind of had. And then she kind of gave, since Erin and I won't be able to go to the site visit, she gave us a little preview of the day, which it sounds like it's going to be a really awesome site visit. So if you are in northwestern Pennsylvania, or you feel like taking a vacation, which was her suggestion, out to northwestern Pennsylvania, and we can speak to more of that in the agenda later today. But definitely, it sounds like it's going to be a really good one. So thank you to Misty for her time in that breakout room.
Thank you, Kendi. How about curriculum design and development with Melissa and Sam?
So our group kind of talked a little bit about where they were with curriculum processes and integrating SCL into those discussions. And STEELS really came out as part of the good driver of a lot of those discussions right now, because student-centered learning has a lot of that moving away from content for content's sake and focused on good student-centered priorities. So we had a lot of discussion around how integrating those has helped discussions with teachers, board, community to help to see those transitions, as well as looking for what are some of those key points. We had somebody sharing out some information about how they actually build in those kind of check marks for teachers to know within that in focusing on that, what those students should be covering, and mastery points so they can have that communication between the various grade levels.
Great, thank you. The teaching and learning group with Melissa and Shanna.
Yes, so I'll speak for the teaching and learning group. It's nice that Melissa just brought that up from the curriculum lens, because that was kind of our jumping off point in the teaching and learning, was that the STEELS standards, the shift to them in the classroom has led to more student-centered learning, but not just in the STEELS area. It's now kind of moving in other terms to some other content areas as well, more inquiry-based practices. We said, our teachers, when we go in and we look at a classroom, are doing a great job already of integrating, whether it's project-based learning or what did we say here? Sorry, I was looking at my notes. Station rotation, inquiry-based learning, those terms, they kind of start somewhere and then they've kind of evolved over time. So we've been, there's classrooms that this has been in for some time. So that was kind of our discussion too, and the kind of like around that STEELS shift and how that's changed kind of what we're doing in the classrooms.
Great, thank you, Melissa. And our last group, community outreach, Christina and Joy.
I can share about that one. So we talked a little bit about like some different, we just kind of brainstormed some different categories of ways that we can interact with community partnerships through nonprofits like United Way or the Salvation Army or Local Wise. But we also have, there's different connections to libraries, after school providers, business and workforce, and even reaching out to parents and families that have those connections with the workforce as well. And we kind of talked a little bit more too about some of the different challenges that schools might be facing in being able to create these partnerships, whether there's just that connection, trying to figure out who to talk to at those local businesses, or finding the time in the schedule to kind of do that. Some schools might not be ready to have that conversation yet, and kind of focusing maybe on the administration and leadership or the teaching and learning part first, and then kind of pulling in those partners to kind of help enhance those different things that they're already doing. And just kind of working with those partners to kind of understand how the workforce, businesses can tie into the schools, and work with students that are learning.
All right. Thank you for that, Christina. So we appreciate all those discussions that you've had. And as Kendi alluded to, we have some exciting events coming up, and I want to pass it over to her
Tim,
to kind of share a little bit as to kind of what to expect around the state.
Tim,
with our
I just wanted,
Oh.
sorry, I wanted to mention one more thing in our breakout group.
Yeah, go for it, Sam.
We had Kevin Morrow in our group. He's the math curriculum advisor for PA Department of Education, and he is involved with students that are learning more on a national level. Kevin, if you want to kind of talk, what you were saying in our group, I think it'd be valuable to share with the whole group.
Absolutely. Kevin Morrow, Math Curriculum Advisor, PDE. The Department of Ed is involved in an organization called CCSSO. It is a national organization, has different various areas, I don't know if you've ever heard of it, to support at the state level. I am the contact lead for that for student-centered learning. So when we go to national events, I will be going to all of those and bringing back, hopefully, resources I can share with the leadership team, they can share out with everybody. And as you move forward, if you ever have any questions, reach out to me. I'm supporting you, especially with that math curriculum piece, because it's a balance between expectations of all that curriculum and content and getting students engaged in the classroom. And math is a very good one that with the practices and the steel stuff that's there. So thank you.
All right. Thank you, Kevin, for sharing that. We look forward to you bringing back those national perspectives to us potentially in the future. So thanks, Sam, for bringing that to our light. So again, we want to kind of transition here since we're getting a little bit short on time. I want to let Kendi highlight some of the things that are coming up.
Sure. So we have site visits are a great opportunity for you to go and actually see all of this learning in action. It really will help you concretely visualize what's happening with students that are learning across the state and give you some models to build off of or take and use your own. So we really encourage you to check these out when you have the opportunity. I'm going to turn it over to Kelsey, who just supported a site visit at Clarion Limestone High School. Kelsey, do you mind sharing just for a minute about how that went and some of the takeaways maybe?
Absolutely. Thanks, Kendi. Yes, we recently partnered with Clarion Limestone, one of our local districts, to host a site visit. They're in their third year of a student-run manufacturing program. It's called Lion Manufacturing. And so we saw that this program aligned with quite a few of the system components for teaching and learning, community outreach, and of course, admin and leadership support. One message was very clear during that site visit that they had a strong admin support for this initiative from beginning and still continuing to this day. Every year they host an open house to community members, business and industry partners, and to other schools if they want to come in and see what they're doing. So we placed our site visit on purpose on the same day and time as that open house. So the group that we brought in joined about 30 others as well for that open house crowd. The students, it was very student-centered, the presentation, the site visit itself. They provided a presentation on how they got started, and they shouted out the Industrial Resource Center in the Northwest region, NWIRC, who helped them get the funding for the program. And then the students shared local companies they're working with. They provided pictures and had some hands-on products that they have crafted over the last couple years. And then the students also provided a tour of the different shops, their agriculture, their woodworking, metalworking, and also spotlighted their media. They have a growing media division that helps with their marketing and doing some really neat promos. It was a great day to spotlight one of our regional student-centered learning standouts. And yeah, that's all I had, Kendi. I hope that was what you were looking for.
Yeah, thank you so much. Okay, now we do have two upcoming site visits, one up in the northwest part of the state and one towards the capital area of the state. First, I'm going to hand it over to Christina, and then Holly, when she's done, if you want to hop in, just give us like a 1-minute overview of your upcoming site visit.
Yeah, thank you, Kendi. I'll share a little bit about the Warren County School District. site visit. This is going to happen on December 3rd, and this is going to happen at the Warren County Career Center. And you're going to be able to tour the STEM Academy, the Strive Academy, the Career Center, and even talk about and learn about the virtual academy services. Like Kendi mentioned earlier, Misty Weber is going to help with this site visit. I know Misty is on this call. If Misty, you want to share anything really quick about the site visit?
Yeah. So there are 3 different programs that you're going to be seeing. One of them is called the Strive Academy, and it's actually a program that supports students with disabilities as they transition from high school to adult life. And with that, they go through real world work-based learning experiences and skills and developing them through the PASE program. So it's a really neat program to be able to be part of, to see how to meet the needs of those particular students in your school district. We also have the STEM Academy. The STEM Academy has a TV studio. We have a flight simulator. We are doing partnerships with colleges to earn credit in drone and pilot. And we also have a whisper room. A lot of our kids are really diving deep into the music engineering. And so it's really neat to see that. We actually got the PA Smart Grant. So we are partnering with a lot of community organizations and looking at thermal drones and how drones can service the community as well. So that's a really neat area to come and visit. And then also, of course, we have our virtual academy services, and I can always chat about what we do to help meet the needs of students across the state in our program.
Awesome. Thank you, Misty, so much for sharing a little bit about those programs. That site visit is from 10 to 2 on December 3rd. So we would love to have you register and come out and see what's all going on. So Polly, if you want to share your site visit.
In February, we're going to have a site visit with Derry Township School District, which is the day after P&C. So why not come and have some fun? It's right where P&C is going to be hosted in Hershey. And I'm working on the details still because it's coming up, but we are going to be discussing and showing their online program and how they are implementing and having the kids work in the community to complete community projects like Appalachian Trail cleanup and having the students meet there. So that's creating socialization and community projects and real life experiences. More details are coming, but let me have that as a teaser. Please come out and visit.
Awesome. Thank you both. So across the state, we have, so if you're interested in those site visits, there is a document of RSVP form right on the pre-registration form a week in advance, right on our agenda that you can use. And if you're like, I could do a site visit, hook me up. I want people to come to my district. There is a school visit open house sign-up sheet, and then somebody would reach out to you to help make those arrangements. Moving on to other events statewide, we have some really great things happening at the Student-Centered Learning Summit at P&C, which we'll be having lots of sessions directly about student-centered learning. Before that, we will be having a PASCL meetup. So if you are planning to go and you are here today, you are invited to join us. We're going to have a raffle and just some community building around PA student-centered learning, get together, see each other in person. So it'll be a really fun afternoon. We are also launching a Shift to Student-Led book study. If you're familiar with the book, it looks like this. It's by Catlin Tucker and Katie Novak. I always forget about poor Katie in there. We just did this regionally with a few of the IUs in my area, and it's now open to statewide. So there's a registration form in there. It kicks off in February. We would love to have you come read with us. I see the question about how do we register for the February 2nd summit. You would apply, if you're signed up to go to P&C, then you can go to the summit. So I can't remember if you have to sign up for specific sessions ahead of time at P&C or not. I don't think you do. So you would just go up to the hotel for the summit if you're registered for P&C. And then there is also a PASCL educator cohort experience happening with IU12 and IU15, and then some save the dates for some future sessions as well coming up across the state. We have one out west, we have one here on the East Coast. So we really wanted to provide lots of in-person experiences for you this year, and more ways to connect. So we're really excited about a lot of these things that are happening and hope that you will join us. And all of the links and all the information for these things are right in our agenda. I'm going to hand it back over to Tim now to wrap us up.
All right. Thank you, Candy. Appreciate that. So much going on. Again, we want to build this beyond just our virtual meetings and make sure we're getting together in person and can make some connections in that way. But we do have some more virtual meetings scheduled for this year. So our next one will be after that P&C Student-Centered Learning Summit. Our next virtual meeting will be February 25th at 9 o'clock again. We're really excited to have Greg Baer from the Grable Foundation to be our guest speaker in February. Doing such great work with their community out in the western part of the state. He's going to share some ideas around that idea of community connection. So we're excited to have him join us and share his expertise for some of the amazing work that the Grable Foundation is doing. So as a reminder, all the resources that we put out for you, we're going to share through our OER Commons. We're going to continue to grow that. Remember, if you have specific questions about student-centered learning in your area, remember on the agenda, you can find your point of contact for student-centered learning and be sure to reach out to them. And please give us your feedback. If there's something you'd like to see more time dedicated towards during these meetings or in-person events, please fill out our feedback survey and give us your ideas on what you'd like to see. So thank you for joining us today. We appreciate you being here, and we look forward to seeing you either in person at some of our site visits or in-person events, or back with us again in February at our next meeting. So thank you again for joining us. We look forward to seeing you in the future.